Wow. Okay, hi. This is Angela from Fun and Forth, coming live for the third time today. I think I have my sound issues dealt with. So sorry about all that. If you have stuck with me through all of this, I really do appreciate it. I don't know why today has been such a struggle, but anyways, here we are, and we are going to talk about the first weeks of school and what the first weeks of school look like for you, all of the questions that you need to ask, the two routines and that I feel are most important for you to establish over and over and over again in those first few weeks, and talk about academics as well. So once again, I'm Angela from Fun and Forth. I'm super excited that you're here with me, especially if you've stuck through all of this. If you're watching the replay as well, thank you very much to you too. All right, let's switch over here. Okay. So planning the first weeks. As we're talking today, really what I'm going to be referencing over and over again is this little plan that I've created for myself. This is something that I kind of update each and every year, but for the most part it stays essentially the same, and it really keeps me on track in those hectic first few weeks. So you'll notice that I've kind of got things laid out with just quick little notes here. It's definitely not as detailed as my day plans would be, and it's more detailed than my year plan, but it's a nice little pacing guide just to keep me going in the right order so that I don't forget anything crucial. So as we're talking, if this is something that you think that you might like, then you can grab a free editable version of it off of my website. So I'll tell you how to do that real quick. If you head to funandforth.ca and you scroll down a little bit, you're going to see these three different colored boxes. The middle one, the blue one, says Resource Library. And you click that button there that says Get Access, and it takes you to a page that looks like this. When you're there, you type in your email address and your first name, you hit the button, and then you're going to get a confirmation email. This is just something legally we have to do, but you hit confirm there, and you get a second email that is going to have the link and the password to the resource library. I just want to point out quickly, I've been getting a few emails from people lately. It seems like that email is taking about 5 minutes or so for my email service provider to send out. I'm not quite sure why, but it's not totally instant, but it is pretty quick. So certainly if that's something you do and you don't get it within a half an hour, shoot me an email and I will love to help you out, but it seems to be taking a moment or two. So when you get that and you get that link, you're going to end up here in my resource library. It is full of tons of good free things for you, but right near the top is the first week's plan. So you click on that and it's going to download a version for PowerPoint for you that's completely editable so that you can use a similar system in your room. Okay, so enough about that, but before we move into really what the first few weeks look like, I want to stress the importance of taking care of yourself. It is so exhausting in the first few weeks. Sorry to say it, but it's true. You are going to be tired, and it's really important that you remember to take care of yourself. So this point here is one I need to constantly remind myself about too. It's not easy, but try to set some boundaries on your time at school and stick to them. So think about your priorities and what can you leave behind, what can stay for another day. Make sure that you go home and that you get plenty of rest. In the days leading up to school and also in those first few weeks, maybe on the weekends, do something that is just for yourself. So maybe take a walk, have a hot bath, go for a pedicure, meet up with a friend for lunch. Do something, at least one thing, if not a few, so that you can take care of yourself and recharge, because we know that if we are not at our best as the teacher, we are not going to do our best in that classroom for our kids, and that's what really matters. Make sure you get plenty of rest, and make sure that you drink lots of water too, so that you can stay energized. Okay, questions that you need to ask, especially if you're new to the school, or if you're new to teaching altogether, there's going to be so many questions that you need answers to. And one thing I find when I'm talking to new teachers that's really common is that they tell me they are too afraid to ask. And I know it can be hard to advocate for yourself, a little bit uncomfortable, but it's so important that you do that, guys, because everybody in your building wants to see you succeed. They want to help you, but they're all kind of going through that crazy first week stuff that you are, and they'll forget to reach out. So you need to take those first steps and reach out. People will love to help you. You just have to let them know. Do not be afraid. I know it feels awkward. You really want to familiarize yourself with the school and the school grounds. So either on your own or with somebody, be sure you take a tour around. Find out where everything's at, the big things like the office, computer lab, library, but also the little things that maybe only the teachers need to know about, like a paper room, a math and science storage room, a book room. Find out where that stuff is at. I've had lots of people tell me that they didn't know where the paper room was until November, and that's not okay. So make sure that you are finding out where all that important stuff is. One really good thing that you can do is visit your school website. So that's a place where you can find out kind of what's important to your school, what the school motto is, maybe some history on the building. So take a look there to find out some other information as well. And then review your school policies and procedures. You want to know about whether kids can wear a hat in the hallway, whether you can chew gum, if you have a dress code. Do kids just come in after recess, or do they line up and get collected in? And you can find lots of that information in maybe a school handbook, or we usually have it in the first few pages of our student agendas. They have lots of good information about that sort of thing. So find a place where you can get all of that school policy information and read up on it so that you know what all the expectations are for everyone. And then meet your colleagues. It, again, can be a little bit daunting to put yourself out there, but in those days leading up to school, as you're in the building, you're setting up your classroom, other people will be as well. Stop by their room, stick your hand out, and start building those professional relationships right away. Don't wait for other people to do that. You need to take those first steps yourself and establish yourself as a member of that school community. And finally, find out what the first few days of school traditionally look like in your building. For example, when do you get your new class of students? Are there any whole school events that you need to be planning around? Things can really vary building to building, even within a district. The school that I have taught at for the last 5 years, we usually didn't get our students until Thursday afternoon or Friday morning, which meant that I was spending those first few days with my previous year's class. So I needed to plan some things to do with them that were getting us back into the routines of school, but I wasn't jumping into what my new year would look like because this wasn't my new class of kids. And also, if there's any whole school events going on that you need to work into your plan, for example, we did a whole school rotation where you would go either with your class or in house teams and rotate through stations. So you may have a station you need to prepare for, and that's of course important for you to know about. This information probably your administrator is going to email out or put an information sheet in your mailbox, but just in case, I bring it up because it's important that you ask about all those things. And sometimes we don't know what we needed to ask about because nobody brought it up, right? So I guess what I'm stressing here is no question is stupid. There's not too many questions. Ask away so that you are prepared. Okay, day 1 with your new class. I recommend that you arrive early to help with your own jitters. So whether that means you go into your classroom and you just sit and you look around, or you go to the staff room and get a cup of coffee and chat with people, whatever it is for you, but kind of getting yourself into the building and getting used to the day and easing in is really helpful for you. Sometimes, I wake up the morning of and I'm like, I've forgotten how to do this. I'm not going to be able to teach. I don't know anything anymore. So just going in and reminding yourself, okay, yes, I can do this is always a good thing. And dress for success. So if you're not going to dress up any other day of the school year, this is the day you should do it. Not only are first impressions a real thing, it's going to help you with any confidence issues you have. If you know you look good, you're going to feel better too. So make sure you dress up a little bit. It really does help. When you get that new class of kids, greet each and every student with a smile. That smile really does go a long way. And aim to memorize their names by the end of the day. That's always a goal that I have, is to know who's who by end of day at the latest. And community building name games can really help you with this. That's something we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit here. On day 1, you definitely need to be practicing your classroom routines. Don't wait to start those. Classroom routines need to start right away, but keep it fun. So I always say the goal for day 1 should be to have your students going home and saying, I got the best teacher ever. You want them pumped up. You want them excited for the year. And of course we have to go over rules. But if you spend the whole day with just talking and them sitting and listening and rules, they're not going to go home saying that. So you have to find that way to put a twist on introducing your expectations and routines that keeps it fun for your kids so that they're wanting to come back. So like I said, one of your goals for day 1 should be to memorize each and every student's name. And a suggestion I have for that is that when you take attendance for the very first time, greet each and every one of your students with their name. So what I mean is you might say, hello, Angela, nice to meet you. You're going to look right at the person and smile. If you don't know what your student's name is, like if you're not sure how to pronounce it, this is when you need to politely ask that. Because yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing maybe to say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your name, or, oh, did I say that right? But you want to do this now because you don't want 2 weeks or a month down the way for a student to correct you or another classmate to correct you. You want to know how to say it right away, right off the bat. It's so important that we are saying our kids' names properly. Yes, it is going to take you some extra time to go through your attendance list by greeting every single student with some variation of this, but it's really going to help you in the long run. Looking at your students and saying their name is not only going to help to build immediate relationship with them, it's going to help you with that memorization of who they are too when you make that eye contact. And there are lots of fun different name games that you can play. If you just do a quick little internet search for community building name games, you're going to come up with a ton. But I will tell you about a couple of them quickly here. So one thing you can do that is fun is you get all of your class to sit in a circle or stand in a circle, and starting perhaps with you to model, you're going to introduce yourself and say one activity or hobby you'd like to do. And when you say that activity or hobby, you will come up with some sort of action for it. So for example, I might say, hi, my name is Miss Gat and I like to read. And then I would put out my hands like a book and like flip the page of the book, make a little book reading action. So what happens then is each kid will say, hi, Miss Gat, and they'll put their hands out and make the book reading action too. And it goes around the circle, they all say it. And when it goes all the way around, the next person introduces themselves and comes up with an action for their hobby. So, hi, my name is Steve. I like to play hockey. And then they shoot a stick at every kid. Hi, Steve. Shoots the stick. Hi, Steve. And on and on and on. So that's one game that you can play. Another game you can play that really gets kids moving is where you can just say, find someone who, it could be anything. Find somebody who has the same number of letters in their name as you. Find somebody who has the same number of syllables in their name as you. Find somebody whose name starts with the same letter as yours. You can make up all sorts of different things. It gets your class up and moving, but if they don't know each other well, it really gets your kids talking to each other. So they're going to have to say, hi, my name is, what's your name, and introduce themselves. You can even add in a little piece where they have to shake hands, or if you pause and the students have to introduce each other to the classroom too. Okay, building community, I would say above all else, is key in your classroom. If your students don't feel safe in your room or in your school, they're not going to learn, or they're certainly not going to learn as well as they could if they felt safe and if that community was established. So I suggest that you have at least one community building game or task each and every day for the first few weeks of school. There's lots of different ways you can do this. So you can do it with games like the name games that I just was describing, or other games as well. You can do this with social responsibility picture books, which we'll be talking more about later. Positive notes are something that you can introduce in the first few weeks. This is something I do in my room where I have bins with different sentence starters on them. We do, one of the picture books we read is the bucket filler book. So one of them says, so-and-so filled my bucket today by. Another one says, I am thankful for so-and-so because. And so you can introduce those and get kids to fill them out for one another, have a board to post them in your room, and just start recognizing those positives in one another really helps to build your community. I like to write one for each and every student when I'm introducing it. Class agreement is another thing that we'll be talking about in a moment here too. There is a blog post I have called 3 Simple Ways to Build Classroom Community. And when we're done talking today, I will put a link to that in the comments so that you can find that and read a little bit more about some of these things here. Okay, class agreement. Again, this is one I have a blog post about that I will post the link for you after. This is something that I really enjoy doing each and every year because it's the rules or expectations of my classroom, and it always works out to what I want it to be. But I work together with my students to build these expectations, and that's where the power lies. So day one, and if you look back at that first week's plan I showed you at the beginning, I usually read a picture book like David Goes to School. It's a super fun little picture book. And it really gets kids thinking about what do they want their classroom to look like, sound like, and feel like. And so we have a little conversation after we read the book. I put a chart up on the board and take any and all answers that kids give me about how our classroom should look, sound, and feel. And I just throw them up underneath. You can see a little bit of that as an example in the graphic I have at the bottom there. And that's about where I stop for day one. Then on day 2, we come back to this list, and with 3 or 4, no more than 4 different colors, we start to circle things that relate to one another. So you can see again in that graphic at the bottom that anything that was in blue we felt related to each other, anything in red went together, anything in green went together. And I always start my class agreement with a line that says something like, we agree to be learners who. And all these colored pieces that we're putting together will turn into 3 or 4 at the most ends of that sentence. And these are going to be the things your students will agree to for the year. So on day 2, all we do is we kind of come up with those points and then we leave it. And we come back the next day, I've got it all written up on a chart paper. I ask them if they want to make any changes, and then this is the day that we sign to it and agree to it. And by going through this several day process with your kids, you're really helping to increase their sense of belonging and responsibility in your classroom. And because they helped create it and because they've signed it, it really boosts accountability for their actions. So this is something that we reference all year long. And I'll just say something simple like, but are you following the class agreement with that? And I don't have to say any more than that, but they know exactly what I'm talking about, and their behavior can change to something that is more responsible, respectful, and safe. And like I said before, it's always come out to something that would be about what my expectations would be for the room. Every year it's always written a little differently, but it's always something I can live with. So like I said, I'll post that link at the end here too. Before we go further, here's that first week's plan again. And you can see in that top row that I have class agreement in week 4. So this is not something I'm doing right away. We definitely need to get that community built in our room so that kids even feel safe just to make those suggestions of what they want our classroom to look like, sound like, and feel like. But also I've got some other lessons that are happening in the weeks before leading up to this. So I'm kind of warming up their brains through these social responsibility lessons with these picture books so that we can get to a point where they're ready to have a conversation about that and they've really been thinking about it. So just know that this is not something we're doing right away. Okay, routines. There are so many different procedures and routines that you need to teach. Here is just a small little list of them. This is definitely not even all. But you need to talk to your kids about what does it look like when we line up? How do we get a drink? When is it an okay time to get a drink? How am I going to get your attention as the teacher? I'll stop and talk about that one for a second here. I use 2 different things in my room consistently above all else. One of the things I use is from Whole Brain Teaching. I use Class Yes. So if you're not familiar with that, what happens is the teacher, when she wants or he wants the kids to listen, will say class, and the students respond with yes. And when they say yes, they are to free up their hands, face the teacher, and be ready to listen. So conversation stops, and they're ready to hear. But the fun thing about it is that however the teacher says yes, says class, that's how the kids have to respond with yes. So if I say classy class, they say yesy yes. If I say classity class class, they say yesity yes yes. So it can be a really fun one where you can get a little bit silly with on day 1 to really practice that. And kids love it, and they will remember that and stick with it through the whole year. The other thing that I do to gain student attention is I have a chime in my room. And what I like about Class Yes is that because it's my voice, I have it accessible with me at all times in all places. But the chime I like because the sound of the chime I have lasts for about 5 seconds, and that's how long it takes your brain to switch thinking about one thing to another. So it's a really good reminder for me actually to wait for the chime to finish making its sound before I start giving my instructions, because then I know my kids are actually ready to listen to me. That wait time in there is super important. So there's tons of different ways you can get student attention, but whatever your ways are going to be, you need to teach them. Going through this list a little bit more, morning routines are something you're going to need to teach. How to ask a question, what does it look like to clean up, what are our procedures for the bathroom, How does the end of day look? If there's agenda procedures or cleaning up the room, or if you have student jobs that need to be done. I put fire drills on here. They're not something I would talk about on the first day. If I did, it would be like a one sentence, if the fire bell goes, we need to leave this way. And I would leave it at that. They're important and we need to practice them for sure, but it's just a little bit scary, I think, for day one. So find out when your school is going to do their first fire drill practice and talk about those things in the days leading up. Hallway manners are one that you're going to have to practice all year long, but before you even get out into the hallway, make sure you're having that conversation about what you're wanting to see. Again, there's lots of different expectations for that, lots of little different tricks you can use, but be clear on all of those things before you go out into the hallway. You need to talk to your kids about what handing in work looks like and voice levels. Voice levels are another really fun one to practice on day one. And through a quick little 10-minute lesson, it can last for the whole year long. So again, I've got a blog post on that I'll link to later. But what I use in my classroom is 5 different voice levels. I use 0, which is silent, 1, whisper, 2, partner work, 3, group work, and 4, your presentation voice. So on day 1, I introduce all of these different voice levels. And then I get kids to practice. And when I get them to practice, I say, okay, show me what 1 looks like. And so they'll all kind of turn to each other, whisper a little bit. Show me what a 4 looks like. And they'll all use these big, loud, booming voices. And then I'll start just like showing them fingers. And whenever things get rowdy, you always go back to 0. And as you're doing that, they're practicing the voice levels, they're giggling, they're having fun. You end with 0, silent, and that's it. And for the whole rest of the year, whenever you're doing a task, you can say, okay, what do you think the voice level for this task needs to be? And they'll tell you. And then you, as they're working, if things get too noisy, oh, I don't know if this sounds like a 2, guys. And then go right back to that 2 because you practiced it on day 1. Please don't expect your students to remember all of your routines right away. Day 1 is going to be really overwhelming for them too. They're in a new class, they've got new kids, you've talked to them about a tour of the room and all the fun things you might do that year, and you've gone through these routines. It's just a lot. So you need to consistently practice these routines throughout the first weeks. Every day should be about community and practicing routines. It's also important that you find polite ways to correct improper behaviors while you're establishing those routines, because letting the little things slide in the beginning when you're establishing this can lead to year-long behaviors. So find some ways to politely correct that and fix that. So example, if you're doing class yes, and somebody, maybe you say class, and they are supposed to go yes, but one kid goes yes, you can say, oh, remember, we have to all do it the same way. Let's try again. And just that little bit of accountability in the moment is going to let them know this is the way we do it, and we do it properly each and every time. Okay, we've been talking for a while now, and I haven't really talked to you about academics at all. And that's because I feel like in those first few days, academics should not be your focus. Your focus is that community building and the routine. But you can find ways to build academics into your community building and integrate them into your school expectations, your classroom routine lessons, and any sort of self-regulation tasks that you're doing. So, for example, in my first few days of school, I always have my kids write a letter to me about themselves. And I can tell a huge amount about them through this simple task. So I know about just their general ability to focus. I can tell what their writing stamina looks like. I can tell what their vocabulary looks like, their fine motor skills, their spelling ability, so many things from this community building task. And there's lots of other ways that you can do that. Like, for example, through the picture books that I was talking about, this community picture books. You can do some response activities with that where you are still tackling content, you're building all of those important pieces in their language arts curriculum, like talking about questioning, making connections, but you're doing it with your community building. And I really believe that you need to ensure those routines and community are established before diving really deep into your content. So here we are back at that first week's plan again. You can see I do have language arts on here. I do have math on here. Science and social studies are not in this first week's plan. That does not mean that I am waiting until week 6 to do those things. No. Usually I will start some social studies or science week 3, maybe week 4 at the latest, but it's not what I feel is the most important part of those first few weeks. I really believe that if you get that community and you get that routine established, then you're going to have success to move through those academics later. But I'll pause here for a second just so that you can see that there are academics built in here for sure. Okay, one last little piece I want to talk about is assessment. Your district is probably going to have some assessment deadlines that you need to know about and some specific assessment tools or programs that you will need to use for data collection. Again, this is probably going to come to you in a staff meeting or an email, but you need to find out exactly what's required of you so that you don't miss any of those pieces. But some assessments you might want to complete include some sort of a reading assessment to find out where each of your students are at, an oral reading piece as well as a reading comprehension assessment. And that's probably going to look different depending on the grade you teach and the school you're in, what program they have purchased for you, but there's lots of different options out there for you to do that with. A writing assessment, this could be as simple as that introductory letter I was talking about, or maybe something more formalized. Spelling, I like to use Words Their Way, but again, there are lots of other different programs out there that you could use to assess students' spelling ability. Math, my district has created a math assessment for each and every grade that we need to do in the fall, so you may have something similar. I recommend that you leave these assessments until at least the second week of school if possible. Again, your focus in that first few weeks needs to be routines and community. Okay, so that's where we're going to end off for today. Thanks for sticking with me through all my technical problems and things. I really hope you found this valuable. You can always reach out to me on my website or through email, which is angela@funandforth.ca. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, you can leave comments either on this post or on through my email, or even private message me here. So next week is the last in my series of kind of new teacher information training, and I will be coming to talk to you Thursday again next week. So we'll go back to the regular day of Thursday, and we will talk all about year planning and so what that long range planning looks like. So if you have anything that you want me to tackle in that one, again, you can always email me ahead of time and let me know. But again, thanks so much for watching today. Have a great afternoon.